Well, hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to the Quality Hub, chatting with ISO experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here with Brian Smith, consultant at Core. Glad you could join us again.
Glad to be here.
It's great to have you back. And this time it's going to be a little different because we're going to be celebrating World Health and Safety Day and looking at leading a safety culture that lasts. Brian's been involved in a lot of ISO 45001 over the years, and we want to have a great conversation with him on this. Brian, can you share a little bit about your experience in that field?
Sure. So ISO 45001 is a fairly new standard.
Mm-hmm.
It replaced OSHAS 18001.
Okay.
2012-ish.
Okay.
Somewhere around there.
So a little over almost 15 years.
Yeah. Wow.
Or ISO 9001's what, like been 3 decades or 3 centuries or something?
That's pretty old.
It's a long time, yeah.
Yeah. So I happened to be a factory manager at the time, and we needed 45,000.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to teach it, had to learn it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a really good standard. There's some caveats to it that weren't in 18,001 for the better.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my first experience. And then I did spend some time as a health and safety and environmental specialist, and picked up a lot of things there it was a scope of about 4,000 people. So It was pretty big. So
that is big.
I've seen the small, I've seen the big. And I actually brought my stuff with me when I came to Core back in 2018 and started the program here.
And you support a lot of people in that with us. That's great. Well, let's kick this off with the first question. With your experience dealing with small and large, why do you find some organizations achieve 45001 certification, but they still struggle to build that safety culture that really lasts?
But, let's talk about quality. Quality is best if it's top driven. The goals, the targets, the risks, the business risks, the resource allocation, that all has to come from the top,
right.
And the tone has to be set.
Right.
Where with safety, it needs to be a bottom driven management system.
Now, can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. So, as the CEO, I'm not in a whole lot of danger. Right.
Well, let's hope not.
Right. My fingers and toes are pretty safe in here. Quality's a culture that you have to lead from the top.
Right.
Safety's a culture that if it's not led by the folks on the ground, it's just not gonna be that effective.
Because they're realizing the risks. They're seeing more of the risks.
Well, yeah, and it is more of a day-to-day attitude. There's been a lot of talk about, you walk in and you see signs everywhere, safety first, safety first, safety first. And you get this sense that, oh, they got us, corporate's got us on this. Corporate can't help you. Corporate can give you the resources, but you have to look out for the guy beside you and yourself, or it's not going to work.
So the brake on that forklift is a little touchy.
Right.
Just know it. No, report it. No one's going to know unless they use that particular machine.
Exactly. And it goes further than that with the continual improvement. It's, you have to give the folks the time, the resources, and whatever they need. I've seen some really, really good safety improvements, and none of them came from corporate.
Okay. So bottom up. Got it. So kind of flipping that, how can executives move safety from being viewed as an operational obligation to a shared leadership responsibility?
Leadership has to take the correct role.
Okay. So what might that role be?
Well, you're the resource provider,
okay,
and the cheerleader and the culture supporter, I guess you would say. So
do you have to keep asking, how are we at with this?
No, you got
to. Is that one of the ways to really be proactive?
It really should be structured, right? Okay. So you got to put the vibe out there that as CEO, I'm not in charge of this.
Okay.
I'm here for whatever you need.
Gotcha.
And in quality and in business, as a line staff, I would get nervous. People get nervous when you see top management taking that approach. Well, who's steering this thing? Right. So
maybe some of that way to do it as a shared leadership is to be that cheerleader, to allow them to speak and make sure there's no problem when there's a problem, to speak up about it. If there's not going to be anything that's, well, we'll get to it when we can, to make sure that they're aware that we've got your back. You just got to let us know when we need to be there.
Absolutely. You can say that all you want, but you got to prove it.
Right.
The first time someone even gets any static for bringing up a safety issue, even if it doesn't pan out, your culture is back to ground zero.
So you really got to keep a positive flow on that and really keep your ears open.
Yeah, they have to understand, the people on the ground have to understand that at any time they can stop work. They can stop a process if they feel it's unsafe. It sounds a little nerve-wracking, like everything's going to be at a standstill. It's not. It's going to take the opposite effect. Well, I can stop it, so I will if I have to. But we're not going to stop it just because I want to. Right. But they have to know that they can.
Gotcha.
Making that convincing is one of your first steps. When you do a new hire orientation, if the cell lead tells you that, that's one thing. But if his boss, and CEO tells you that, then you start to drive that home. Look them in the eye and say, look, I would rather have a late order than somebody's fingers coming off.
Yeah.
And believe that.
Got it.
And then you prove it out through your actions.
Got it.
And that's a culture.
Okay. And that's what we're talking about, how to make that culture that lasts. So let's take a little bit of a different approach here. How can organizations make safety conversations more proactive so they focus on risk prevention rather than only reacting to them? So you said, yes, okay, there's a problem, we're reacting, we're shutting down the line when we need to. What about being proactive?
In 45,001, there's a requirement for hazard identification, but that's required by OSHA and everything else. So the trick is to frequently review the known hazards in an area.
Okay.
You talk about reactive. Oftentimes we have a job hazard analysis, a job safety analysis. It's called many things, but it's different levels of all heading in the same direction.
Right.
When there's an incident or a near miss, we always sit down and do a job hazard assessment review.
Okay.
But the trick is not waiting for that.
Gotcha.
So you want to have timed reviews in time. Like, okay, depending on how wide or how narrow they are, you want to have them at least once a year.
Gotcha.
Where you sit down and, again, you facilitate it as management.
Gotcha.
It has to be clear that, look, this is all I know. What's on this paper? What are we missing?
Right.
And have some kind of process for that. Give them a venue away from production. Make it a deal, and make it clear how important it is. You want to keep reviewing your stuff even when there hasn't been an issue. A lot of times when you do that, you find out there was a near miss.
Okay.
They probably go unreported more than anything.
Okay.
Most of the time we qualify an incident as a lost time injury. So those generally get reported, but there's sometimes they don't too. And we'll talk about that here in a minute.
Okay. So being the proactive is giving a venue, letting people be heard, regular reviews. Maybe it's more frequently than a year.
Yeah, whatever.
It really depends on what you've got to do.
Well, and how young and how new your system is.
Okay.
But even as it gets older, it can always be improved, and you don't want to get complacent. But
right, and we're talking mainly about manufacturing, hinting towards that when it comes to safety in other situations and other styles of business. What do you see being proactive, maybe?
Again, reviewing it, because there's different types of injuries, and we kind of, in manufacturing, ergonomic injuries are one thing,
right?
The way the work is set up, but even in an office setting, over time, carpal tunnel and that kind of stuff's a real thing.
Yeah, and tripping hazards.
Yeah, some of the chemicals you can be exposed to in an office setting or service, and there's the psychological risks. Right. And they kind of get overlooked sometimes.
And we're going to be talking about that next year.
Yeah. So that's one thing you want to be careful of. to make sure it's on the table. Yes, you're not going to sit here and say that the severity of the risk sitting in an office doing order entry is the same as it is, out in a steel mill. But you still got to be aware that there's things that can hurt your employees and hurt your business.
Yeah. Okay, so Brian, you mentioned psychological. I know that 45,001's update is approaching that a little bit more heavily than it has in the past, which I don't necessarily want to get into, but how should leaders think about psychological safety alongside of the physical safety within this 45,001 framework?
Well, there's a lot of things that can go on out there, and you got to be aware of it. And, some of the labor laws and stuff are set up to prevent this before, 18 and 45 came along.
Mm-hmm.
The way work is assigned, you got to watch, the shifts and things like that. A lot of people, if you give them the opportunity for overtime, they're going to take it.
Right.
And they're not going to stop until you make them. Saw a guy walking sideways one day, and I'm like, I realized he had worked like 15 12s in a row. I'm like, all right, you're done.
Wow.
The other part of it is there can be pressures put on people that you got to be aware of that. Like some jobs, like in sales, are very commission driven. People aren't being stressed to the point where they're unhealthy.
Yeah.
You have the bullying aspect of it, where that's not going to be obvious to top management. That's something you want to definitely put into place from the ground up. And it's really important to put the right people on watch for that. You have those people looking out for everybody else, and that's a different approach. That's not something. Sometimes you take a look at that from a more quiet angle, but you got to watch and listen to everybody. If you think you have an issue where one person is causing someone else not to want to come to work, you got to address that. You got to look out for it.
I think that you touched on some really interesting things there where, there's a lot of different psychological issues. One might be overtime, making sure people aren't getting to a point of fatigue physically and mentally, because that's going to give both physical and mental.
And it could cause physical to make a mistake and get physically injured.
Yeah. And then you have the side of the stress. I think another thing might be something where they can get complacent when they do the same thing over and over. So that's a psychological risk. I know what I'm doing. I know how to handle this machine. Well, there's still some sharp things, and when you're not paying quite as much attention to it as you should be, it's easier to get hurt on it.
Yeah.
And also from a time of, maybe from a mental standpoint, switching sales, instead of just being customer focused, let's take a week and let you do something else, or something like that where you can take a mental break. I know for me personally, when I have to do the same job, I zone out.
There's no windows in here.
Yeah. Well, not just that, but I zone out where it's kind of like, I can't tell what's good and bad, and things get overlooked. And I have reviews on my stuff and are like, how did you miss that? And I'm like, sorry, I was on my 30th hour of editing these videos, and it's like, I just didn't see it anymore. My eyes get blind to it. So
if you were running a gang drill press, that would be a problem, a bigger problem.
But I'm just speaking from a job. That's what I do. I'm conscious of, okay, I can only do so much editing before I need to go do something that's a different aspect of my job. People aware of that. Okay. So what common leadership behaviors unintentionally weaken safety culture, even in organizations with strong formal systems?
Well, like we said, it's a culture thing, and that can be easier said than done. You might think you have a good culture and you don't. It can hide itself.
Well, you sort of mentioned before where the one moment you don't have their back, the one moment you show a little resistance to that sense of safety, you're starting from ground zero again. Yeah.
And it doesn't get any easier to get the culture back when you lose it. What weakens it is top management taking charge of it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like everything else, it's our nature, and top leadership say, all right, everybody wants somebody to drive this ship.
Gotcha.
And how you do that or don't do that is another conversation for another day with business. But with safety, you just have to be careful that as leadership, you want to make it obvious that I'm not in charge of this. You guys are. So the safety committee is really important. But what's most important about that is top management or leadership should be a member, but not lead it.
Okay.
It's a golden opportunity. When 45 first came out, I think I had the first job we had here, and they had a safety committee, but it wasn't real formal, and it wasn't. The process wasn't very strong. So we put together a safety committee, and the CFO was the one that led it. Now, up until that point, any safety discussion was done at operations or management review with top management only. So we were getting ready to have the safety committee meet in the conference table, and CFO came in and headed for the end of the table. And I said, no, you sit over here in the middle or 3/4 of the way down. That whole thing was to make a point that if you're going to pull this culture off, they have to be in charge of it and lead it. Take the right role as management. I'm a member of this. We're all in this together, the same. The only difference is whatever we say here, whatever comes out of this with resources needed, I'm taking that to the rest of the management or the leadership team. So I'm kind of your liaison. Right. Really. And if questions need answered or resources are needed, that's why I'm here. But I'm not here to run this.
Gotcha.
This is you guys' committee. That's really critical. And then the other big thing to weaken it is, and I've seen this, I'll tell you the story if you want. Be careful what you incentivize.
Okay. How would be incentivizing safety would be negative?
Well, you want the story?
Yeah.
So I went into this place and had a really good relationship with top management. And we walked around. He told me a story about a guy. It was a sheet metal shop, pretty big one. And a guy cut his arm, hid it, went home. It got infected. He went to the ER, and the story was he had pet rabbits, and he cut it on the cage of the rabbits. So they found out later that there was an incident at work. And we were walking back towards the office, and I saw this clock on the wall. It was days. You don't even know where this is going.
Yeah.
So many days without a tornado.
Yeah.
This was so many days without a reportable injury. I'm like, wow, it's like it's at 300. I said, what happens when it gets to 365? He said, we throw him a pizza party. I just stopped and I looked at him. Like I said, we'd known each other for a while. I said, you know what you got to do. He got a ladder and he smashed that clock on the floor right there.
Wow.
I said, now go throw him a pizza party.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The timing was perfect. He was just telling me how somebody hid a reportable injury, and then on the wall they're incentivizing no reportable injuries.
Right. So you're incentivized, even though it might seem like, hey, let's be safe and go without any incidents. It's turning it around saying, I don't want to be the one that changes the clock.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not easy finding out what your crew needs as incentive. Somehow with improvement, the data needs to be there that they can understand it. This is how long we've gone without a reportable injury. And that is the result of everything you guys have been doing. But near misses don't get reported. Right. And there's your preventive. A near miss needs to be treated like an incident with no blood. Yeah. Somehow incentivizing reporting near misses. I found a lot of places are incentivizing improvement. Any kind of improvement, even if it doesn't work. The idea was put out. We did whatever you want to call the event. The event was done. And you know what? It didn't work out the way we wanted to, but that's something to be incentivized. Right.
So maybe incentivize reporting near misses.
I've done that. That doesn't seem to work either.
Doesn't seem to work either?
No. I don't know why.
So you got people I almost tripped over that thing that was there so they could get it up for a pizza party.
I thought it would, right? I mean, you definitely want to.
Yeah.
If a reported near miss is a huge, leads to a huge improvement, you certainly want to
celebrate that?
Yeah, definitely. But it's tough.
Yeah.
Because safety is one of those things where we always like to make sure that the folks know what the targets and goals are. and what the data is. And, in bigger outfits, bigger operations, you got to be careful, because last year we may have had 16 reportables. And, if we have 1,000 people, 16 reportables, we can talk all day about whether that's good or bad,
right?
Because out of how many opportunities there were, depends on what business you're in. But out on the bulletin board, we're always going to cite our goal as 0.
Yeah.
In safety, our published goal is 0 injuries. And then there's the real meeting that happens. All right, we had 16 reportables last year. I think we could get that down 25%. If you publicize that, then it's like saying, well, if only 7 of you get your arms ripped off this year, we're going to count it a gain.
Win.
Yeah, it's a big win. So publishing the goal and communicating reality can be a challenge.
Yeah,
you just have to be careful. You just don't throw up there, hey, 8 reportable injuries is the goal this year.
Yeah.
Well, we're one behind.
Yeah.
If you're scoring your risks and things like that, here's our scores for the level of risk that's involved in this area. If we can get these scores down to a mean or an average of this, that's our target.
Yeah.
Get creative. There's all kinds of resources.
So for organizations that do observe World Health and Safety Day, what is one meaningful conversation they should be having internally about that long-term safety culture?
We can only help you so much as top management. This really, really has to be you on the ground, watching out for yourself, which we don't usually talk like that,
right,
and watching out for the person beside you. But there's only so much we can do. And when I'm putting it into you guys' hands, because that's a reality, and also you're the first one that's going to suffer.
Right.
So keep that in mind. A lot of this is on you as the operator, as the player. I can only do so much.
So what would you encourage?
Well, we talked about making sure that they know that they have the absolute power to stop operations if they see an immediate issue. You got to prove to them at some point that safety trumps a profit. Gotcha. And you can say it till you're blue in the face, but the first time you prove it, now you've got people's attention. And you brought up earlier about near misses. You want to make the first time somebody actually reports one, make a big deal out of it. Don't have confetti and whistles and everything, but they're the 1 millionth customer. But make a big deal about publishing it. And again, even if you go into a project and it didn't help anything, be careful not to view that as a failure. And you just encourage people to challenge unsafe conditions. Okay.
Well, this has been great. Any last thoughts on how leading a safety culture that lasts?
It's kind of everything we said. As top management and leadership and ownership, you are the cheerleader and you are the provider of resources. But ownership and accountability have to go down to the folks that are in danger zone.
I really appreciate you being here, Brian. It's been great walking through this, celebrating World Health and Safety Day. Appreciate all your expertise and your experience on this. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
I'm going to give a big thanks to everyone who's tuned in today's episode. We hope you found it helpful and walked away with something valuable. If you'd like to learn more about Core Business Solutions, now proudly part of the LRQA family, and how we can support you with ISO certification, maybe that 45001 certificate, cybersecurity, or customized training, we'd love to hear from you. Just email us at info@thecoresolution.com or visit us online at www.thecoresolution.com. If you haven't already, make sure to follow the Quality Hub podcast on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube so you don't miss out on their next episode dropping next week. Thanks again for listening and have an awesome day.